By the time you see this, it will be Monday, so happy Monday, motherfuckers. Today, I want to talk a little bit about FPV and how I'm getting better in FPV. Now, there's a ton of different ways you could get better at it. I'm simply telling you how I'm getting better at it. I've seen a huge amount of growth in the past 8 months. And that has brought me here. I mean, I just want to share how I'm doing it. So first and foremost, the most important thing, I think there's 4 things that you could do to get better. Number 1, fly more. When I started FPV, I started back in 2016. I think it was 2016. Started flying with tiny whoops. I slowly got into Lizard 95. I got I call it the big whoop. It was the King Kong 125. I just flew more and more these larger quads, but I didn't have a 5-inch quad until about 2 years ago when I finally doubled down and put up the $500 or $600 to get that, and then got better goggles and slowly upgraded my kit. And it wasn't until about 8 months ago, maybe 9 months ago, that I started to get really serious about it. I wanted to get better with my flying. It took me a long time to get where I was at that point, but the problem was that I wasn't really committed to it. I wasn't flying consistently weekly or bi-weekly or anything. It was more, the first time that we flew was out in... We're going to start again. What up, guys? It's Friday here, although you'll see this on Monday. I want to talk to you a little bit about the 4 things that I'm doing to improve my flying. You will hear trains going by honking their horns. You will hear my fridge. I apologize. I hope that the sound is good. But I just want to share with you the things that I've noticed that have improved my flying. And that's what's gotten me here today. So number 1, first rule is fly more and fly consistently. I've been flying since 2016 when I started out with tiny whoops. I upgraded to a Lizard 95. I got a King Kong 125. I was buying a lot of things on Banggood. I had E-Sheen goggles. I had a crappy little controller, whatever. Then that upgraded to the Spectrum X9D, not X9D. What's it called? X80? I don't even know what it's called anymore. But I upgraded to the Spectrum. I had that for a bit, and then I eventually upgraded to the Tyrannus. And this has been my go-to radio ever since. Let's rewind, go back 2 years, bought myself 2 X-Hover Stingy frames. I built them up using Betaflight. I basically copied what Stinger Storm was flying at the time. We went out to the desert, me and my buddy, and we practiced flying. That's pretty much what we did for a week. That got me a lot further in my skill set, but I wasn't quite happy with where that was. And then probably for the next year or so, I would fly inconsistently whenever I could, and I was flying generally not the best hardware, I'd say. I love the frame, don't get me wrong, but I was having a lot of problems with flight controllers going bad or solder pads lifting. That's a lot to do with me and my subpar soldering for the time, but it got better over time, and then I'd say about 8 or 9 months ago is when things got a lot more serious for me, when I upgraded my hardware to KISS. Now I fly Mr. Steele's kit. I built an alien frame, which is what he was flying at the time. About 2 weeks later, he came out with the Apex, so I was a little peeved at myself. I wish I waited, but now I have an Apex. I think it's great hardware. That's a whole other topic. But the point is that this gave me a much more consistent flying experience. It gave me a much better flying experience. I can't tell you how many times I'd go out expecting to fly and something was broken on the quad that I couldn't foresee until I actually went and tried armed. When I built this quad, I was gearing up for a trip to Iceland, and that trip to Iceland raised the bar in a whole new way for me because I was able to do a lot more flying and driving, where my girlfriend drove and I flew. And when I came back, I made myself a promise that I would fly or try to fly at least once a week. And that's what I've been doing ever since. And that started, I'd say, early November of last year, 2019. Now we're in May 2020. And I would say that flying more has just raised the bar for me. And I can't say enough about it. Step 2, fly the simulator. If you don't have a simulator set up, you need to get yourself one. It's super cheap. There's really no excuse for it. If you have a decent computer, you can run it. I've tried Liftoff, I've tried DRL, and Velocidrone. I've bounced around from the 3. Liftoff I can never get running properly. I always had performance problems, like lagginess and whatnot. I attribute it to my machine being old and crappy. DRL runs great, but it's not the most realistic flying experience that I've seen, and I give that title to Velocidrone. Velocidrone, when you set it up properly, is a really good simulator. And I attribute that to, it's not bound to, so like when you first set up DRL, you get to choose a frame, you get to choose motors, you get to choose props, you get to choose your battery type, how many cells it has. The problem is that none of that translates in real time to reality unless you have those exact parts. And I don't fly those parts. I never will. But Velocidrone allows you to, instead of choosing a 5-cell battery, you could just choose the mass of the battery. So you could set it to 110%. It's their weird number that they're using, but it's a lot, I'd say it's not easier to set up, but you can tweak it a lot more and get it to a place where you're happy and where you can fly as if you're in real life. And the goal is to get it as close to real life as possible so that you can easily translate what you're doing on the sim into real life. So steps 1 and 2 are kind of the same. It's really just fly more. And, you know, I live in New York City. I can't fly all the time. It's not easy for me to fly, especially now with COVID. Driving's pretty much out, except for on the weekends. I don't want to lose my spot. And I just fly the sim as often as I can. It's usually once or twice a day, but when that adds up, you're flying maybe 4 or 5 days a week, and that's helped a lot. Step 3, remove obstacles. This goes back to the hardware conversation, and I know it's been covered by other pilots, but I was running into a lot of hardware problems, and that was kind of screwing me up. Where I'd go out, I'd arm up, and either the motor would be bad, or there was something wrong with the flight controller, or a beta flight somehow was misconfigured after an update. There was always a reason that something changed. And I've done my best to reduce that as much as possible. Step 4, one of the best things you can do is meet up with other pilots. It's better if they're better than you are, but just meeting up with other pilots, even if they're not, it's really important that you build that sense of community for yourself and for others and contribute. But not only that, you will become a better pilot for it. Back in March, I went to the FAA protest in DC, and I got to meet a bunch of other pilots that I would have never met from all over the country, South Carolina, North Carolina, Some guy drove out from Texas and Florida. It was incredible. And they are going to improve your skill. You won't even realize that you're learning, but you're learning. And I would say that meeting with pilots that I look up to really advanced my skills. I was able to watch them, watch their technique, see up close what they were doing differently than what I was doing. And it allowed me to make some adjustments in how I do things, and I noticed a huge improvement since then. There's ultimately nothing that can replace that. That being said, with COVID and everything that's happening, you need to still meet up safely at a distance. You can do it. Stay 6 feet apart. It's all possible. I will say one more thing about the simulator. So, one thing that's helped a lot is I have a dedicated Windows box. It's like a leftover machine that wasn't being used for anything else. And I run the HDMI output straight into the goggle. So how you do that is you turn off your receiver module, and you use, it's HDMI to mini HDMI. So it's big HDMI to small HDMI. And you plug it in, and you change the output on the goggle to HDMI. And you also, if you like to fly with sound, which I fly with sound, once you have it hooked up, you can go into the mixer settings for Windows, and you can set the output for audio to this, and you literally have the full setup flying in the sim. It makes it a lot more realistic. If you found this video to be helpful, and if you've even stuck around this long, please give me a like, please comment, please share. If this is something that you're into and you want me to talk more about, please let me know. Your input is important to me. I want to make the channel better. I want to grow with you, and having you guys along for the ride has been really fun so far. I want to keep it going. Thank you.